168 COVID-19 cases, the highest number recorded on a single day in Barbados since the beginning of the pandemic. With close to 1,000 now in isolation, Director of Isolation Facilities Dr. Corey Ford says the country has never been here before.
So I think things have become quite difficult in country. I mean, we have never seen that number before in country. It's certainly a worry for me. I recall 2 weeks ago, I did tell the country that we're about to go through a storm. It is how and what we do that will allow us to get ourselves to the eye of the storm and look forward to getting past the other part of the storm. Things are obviously very difficult. Even standing here right now, I'm wondering about some aspects in terms of placement and movement of individuals across the countries, but I have people on the ground who are actively working to ensure that every single Barbadian is safe when we bring them in. I think the important thing about understanding with people at home and coming into facilities is that some of them, the hardest people to manage are the people who feel well. But the people who feel well are the ones who often get into trouble later. And this is what I worry about. There's a lot that's thrown about saying asymptomatic, but enough has been seen by myself and all of these physicians working in this facility that can change in the blink of the eye. Classical example, an 18-year-old male, not too long ago, a few days ago, who actually took his bags up and said he was leaving, and he left, he walk away. And lucky I was pulling out the facility, I got out, I went to speak to him, and he went back in. That same night, that young man collapsed in the facility and was rushed down to the Harrison Point isolation facility. Thankfully, because of the sort of structure that we have in terms of our system, he was able to make it. But that's really a warning for all of the young people out there who think that they're inflammable and basically that nothing will ever happen to them and it's just a common cold. And I can't predict whether it's going to just be a mild event in terms of illness. But what I can tell you is that we have something out there as young people that can protect us from getting into trouble. And that's simply the vaccination. I'm not here to push that. It's everybody's choice. I always said that from the beginning, right? That's not something that someone wants me to say. I'm not going to say what someone wants me to say. I'm always going to go with the science of the disease. And it's not only Barbados. The rest of the Caribbean, the picture is the same. So everybody can't be wrong. Some of my grandmother used to tell me when I was young, 1,000 Romans can't be wrong. And that's the same situation in this case. And if I showed you what's going on in ICU, and I'm sure you probably see on this is a very serious situation in this country. And if we continue like this, we'll end up in a path of so many people that we might not be able to treat every single person in this country. This is something that I never hoped. But we have a chance as we start to go through the storm to get to the center of that storm safely. And as we go through the next part of the storm, is really where the vaccines come in. If we get people vaccinated as we go to the middle of the storm and the calm of the storm, if the another wave hits, you're probably going to be okay in terms of the number of hospitalizations. I think what people fail to understand is that countries globally have got into trouble, not surely because of the number of cases, 10,000, 9,000 cases, but by the amount of people who actually had to end up hospitalized on ventilators. That is where the rubber meets the road. What that does is it obviously put that person's life at risk, affects them in terms of what goes on in their household. If it's a mummy who's the only person who's working, a daddy who's the only person who's working, or if it's a child, for example, it puts the family under that degree of strain, which is significant. So I think people need to think outside the boundaries. But the last set of deaths really bothered me because I love my grandma. I grew up with my grandma. Very plain and simple. I grew up with my grandma and my grandfather. And what it put in my head is this: if I can do something to protect them from dying or from getting into trouble, I best do it. And I think that's the message today I have. If you have older people in the household who are not vaccinated, I am telling you, as you see the number of deaths increase in Barbados, and they will, right? Because we're not in a good place at this point. But I'm asking people to add wisdom and common sense to what they do.
You're speaking about your staff now. What has been the impact?
And the impact on my staff has been significant. We have to talk. We have a psychologist on board, and I heard her talk today, and almost brought tears to my eyes because it's the truth. We have to hold each other up, basically, in this. And a bunch of young people, I keep saying that, we have to hold each other up during this very, very difficult period. But people are tired. There's no two ways about it. They're tired, and the average Barbadian can step forward and help us at this stage. They can. We have no more legs to give. It's us, right? The hospital has to run on its own and other functions as well. You have no more legs to give, right? But if people continue in the fashion and the platform for which they're doing, it's making it very, very difficult for the healthcare workers on the ground. And then there are those out there who will say all sorts of things. And we understand people are afraid. We understand it's difficult. We understand that. But we on this side as well also is very difficult for us. Many of these guys have not even had vacation for a year and a half, let alone 2 days off.
Dr. Ford, we're just outside of primary isolation. How many persons are currently using ventilators?
So there are people on ventilators. I told you before there are about 23 cases in there, and I keep having the public. By the time I did my last interview and now, or hour ago, it's going to be different because as you were seen, as you were standing here, people were coming and being brought in. So that number can change. It can be different from minute to minute, from hour to hour. People are being moved from between facility according to how they're doing, etc. So that number is like that. But a large percentage of those individuals um, are young people between the ages. I know still think 50 is young. I'm not even close to that age yet, but 50 is young. But a large percent of those are between the age of 17 to 50 years of age. Um, and that's, for me, heart wrenching. Because I'm looking at the beds of some people in there and thinking like that's my age group, and here am I, along with this group of people putting themselves at risk. We could be sitting in one of those beds. The likelihood on my part and my team's part, for the most part, is less because we've been vaccinated and we know that. And that's the one privilege that we know will protect us. And that's my worry. People are on ventilators fighting for their life in here as we speak today. We've gotten people off of ventilators. People are at home that were on ventilators, both where they put it down the mouth and where they put it on your face, as was described in another interview today. There are people who are alive and at home and well. And I'm asking many of them who are like that. So for Barbados who don't think it's real, I need you to call me. I challenge you. I'll give my number on national TV, but I challenge you to call me. Call the isolation center and volunteer to come and give your experience, because I think when Barbadians hear those experiences, they understand that this thing is real and they understand where we're headed. We see things in Grenada, we see things in Bahamas, we see things in Jamaica, we see them in St. Lucia, but we often think they can't happen here. But I'm here to tell you this evening that although you see them in those countries, that is very real that those things can happen here. It is up to what we do. That's basically where we're at. And as we're here doing this, you'll see um, um, some patients currently coming into the facility. And we really have to go off now and deal with this particular.
I understand that you are extremely busy. Thank you for your time. That was Director of Isolation Facilities, Dr. Corey Ford. And where we're going now, only the severely ill go. We're preparing to head into primary isolation with Dr. Young. It requires us to be fully donned in personal protective equipment.
We are here in the primary isolation facility. This is what we refer to as our intensive care unit. And as we walk by, you will see a number of persons who are on ventilators, who are receiving oxygen, and there are some as well who actually have the tube directly into the lungs called intubation.
Dr. Young, you would have seen the first COVID 19 patient. We're here a year and a half later. How have things changed?
Well, things have changed significantly from, I remember the first patient that I treated with Dr. Ford. I remember she walked off the ambulance. She was very comfortable. She actually did not even require oxygen. And at that time, we were at the Enmore facility, and that was our ICU. And our ICU did not have as many patients as you see right now. Our ICU is around 38 bed capacity right here at the Harrison Point facility, and it's almost at full capacity. So we went from March 17th, 2020 to having about less than 10 patients initially at the time when we first started, to now having close to 1,000 in isolation altogether, and having close to 30 patients actually in our intensive care unit. And that's a high number for any ICUs in any part of the world. So it's changed drastically from the time that we first started to now. And it speaks to the fact that things have changed in terms of relates to the COVID-19 variant, the Delta variant, where persons once came in with just, a cough and some occasional shortness of breath, and things have changed now. A lot of persons are presenting with GI symptoms, and then later down, when you expect them to be getting better, they actually then start to get worse. So things have changed drastically, and it's concerning for us as we see these numbers start to rise.
Uh, Tell me about the difference you're seeing in treating those vaccinated versus those unvaccinated.
What we notice about those who are vaccinated, they tend to have not only a shorter stay, but the severity of the disease is not as significant or as severe compared to those who are unvaccinated. And the numbers speak for themselves. When we talk about the percentage, we have about 64% of those who are under isolation who are actually unvaccinated, and about 14% or so who are actually vaccinated. And when you look at those who are in the ICU, quite a large number of those patients are unvaccinated. And these are the ones that you see as we walk through the unit. These are the ones that are on oxygen, just like our patient that we spoke to. She's unvaccinated, and she's on oxygen as well. Some are even on higher amounts of oxygen from the ventilator, and some are even intubated. So we've noticed that those who are unvaccinated usually have quite severe disease and sometimes even end up being intubated, while those who are vaccinated usually have some mild symptoms, and if they do require oxygen, they require oxygen for shorter periods of time, and they get better much faster. As we're walking through the primary isolation facility, I can't help but see a lot of persons on ventilators. Do they usually come off? Right. So one or two patients we've had in our past that have actually come off of the ventilator. Unfortunately, the others that we've had have actually passed away. Unfortunately, our mortality rate for those who are intubated is quite high. However, because of the fact that we've had one or two persons, we still have hope that there's some persons out there who can actually recover and come off the ventilator at some point in time. Okay. So I've been through the full dawning process with you, and it is definitely a lot difficult to breathe. How do you guys manage? And I am really glad that you guys are here and you guys get the opportunity to see and experience what we go through on a daily basis. We work 12-hour shifts, and oftentimes a lot of that time is spent in PPE seeing patients. I mentioned to you about the time that I came to work at 7 a.m. and I was out of the isolation facility at 2 p.m. That was, so from 7 to 2 p.m. I was in PPE seeing patients. Then of course we had to document, and then we have to go over to secondary to manage secondary as well. So it's a very long process. When we actually take off the PPE, we have marks on our foreheads. Our ears hurt because we are wearing the mask for so long. So it is an arduous process, and it's very, very exhausting for sure. There have been significant deaths these last few days. How has that impacted the staff? Right, so the staff here at Harrison Point, we are very dedicated to our patients, and we are very hardworking. And we put a lot of time and effort in. And we even form bonds with the patients. We interact with them, we share a laugh, we share a enjoyable moment as well. And even sometimes some residents even pray for the persons. And to see all of that work being put in, then to lose the patient is very hard on us. And you would have heard that we have a psychologist on with us that we can speak to, but it's often very, very saddening to put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, and then to see our patients go. But we understand that that's the reality of the illness, and that's why it's important to prevent it and prevent persons from getting to the stage where they actually can become pretty severe and God forbid, actually die from the illness. Okay. Thank you so much for speaking to me, Dr. Young. I know you're busy, so thank you once again, and thank you to your staff. Thank you as well.